If you think your family loves you unconditionally, wait until there's $120 million on the table. Because when my grandfather gave me his tech empire as a birthday gift, I thought I'd made him proud. But I didn't know my own mother and stepdad had been planning to take it from me. This is one of the most shocking revenge stories you'll hear on this channel, so if you love real-life drama, betrayal, and justice served hot, subscribe now and buckle in. This story is personal, powerful, and far from over. Let's rewind to the beginning. My name is Eli Blake, and I was 22 when my entire world flipped. I wasn't your average rich kid. Sure, I grew up in a modern home with smart mirrors, personal chefs, and weekend trips to Europe. But I worked hard. I spent summers coding in Grandpa's R&D lab. I learned logistics at 16. I shadowed executives instead of partying on spring break. Grandpa, Harold Blake, tech billionaire and founder of Blake Logic, saw something in me. Mom? Not so much. Mom had always been beautiful and calculated. Her second husband, Douglas Shaw, came into our lives like a Hallmark movie, dashing, charming, helpful. He was a businessman, but I never saw a business card. Just expensive suits and hush-hush phone calls. Grandpa hated him from day one. He's not here for your mother, he told me once. He's here for me. I brushed it off as paranoia. Until the morning of my 22nd birthday. I woke up to find Grandpa sitting in my apartment. Alone. No driver. No assistant. He handed me a small black box. Inside, a 24-karat plated USB drive. Happy birthday, he said. That's control of 51% of Blake Logic. My jaw hit the floor. Grandpa, what are you saying? I'm saying it's yours now. You earned it. And I'm not getting any younger. I couldn't breathe. The transfer was real. My name was now tied to millions in stock, voting rights, and proprietary tech. You've always been the only one who listens, he said. Your mother married a wolf. And I won't let my empire fall into that man's teeth. At first, I didn't tell anyone. But by the next day, word got out. And everything changed. Douglas invited me to his private office in our family home. I walked in, naively, thinking he wanted to congratulate me. Instead, he poured 2 glasses of 60-year-old scotch and said, "You're going to hand that company back over, or you'll regret it." I blinked. Laughed nervously. "You're kidding, right?" He leaned in, voice calm, eyes dead. "No. You're a kid. You don't know what to do with a billion-dollar empire. But I do. So you're going to transfer those shares to me quietly." I stood up. Absolutely not. That night, Mom came into my room. Alone. She sat beside me and sighed. "Eli, you're being selfish. This company is our legacy. You don't know what you're doing. Give it to Douglas. He can run it until you're older." "You mean until he sells it?" Her expression turned cold. She stood up and said 5 words I never thought I'd hear from my own mother. "Pack your things. You're out." I left that night with 2 duffel bags. They froze my credit cards, my security access, my Blake Logic email. I went from billionaire heir to couch surfing CEO. I called Grandpa. He answered on the first ring. "They're faster than I expected," he muttered. "Come to the lake house. We're activating Plan B." Plan B sounded like a joke. But I quickly learned it was a corporate war strategy. Grandpa had seen this coming. At the lake house, I met his private legal team, his cybersecurity advisor, and a forensic accountant. They'd been monitoring Douglas for over a year. Turns out my stepfather wasn't just ambitious, he was criminal. Shell companies. Fake board votes. Secret attempts to patent Blake Logic IP under his own name. Worse? He was in talks with a Chinese firm to sell 40% of our tech in a backdoor acquisition. He was going to sell my inheritance. I nearly threw up. Grandpa placed a hand on my shoulder. "This is why I gave it to you now. Because I knew your mother would never protect it. But you will." I nodded through tears. He continued. "But we don't just defend ourselves, Eli. We end the threat. Permanently. The plan? A full internal audit to expose Douglas's transactions. A secret board vote to reinstate me as acting CEO. A timed press release during the company's quarterly earnings call. And the final touch. A trap. We'd let Douglas believe he was winning, until he walked into a conference room filled with federal agents. But first, I had to re-enter the building. As the disinherited grandson, I was now a liability. But I wasn't going in as Eli Blake. I was going in as Ethan Bryce, a cybersecurity consultant from Montana. Grandpa's old tech buddy created a full backstory. LinkedIn, certifications, burner phones. And just like that, I was hired under contract, back inside my own company. Invisible. Watching. I saw everything. Douglas was already strutting around like a peacock, calling himself interim chairman, hosting lavish meetings, taking conference calls in Italian. Meanwhile, my mother? She stood beside him, glowing. I realized then she never loved me the way I thought. She loved the idea of me. And she loved power more. 1 week later, I sat in a closed-door meeting and watched Douglas brag about a historic deal he was brokering. He had no idea his assistant was wired, or that the documents he was signing had tracking codes built in, or that his consultant, Ethan Bryce, was actually his biggest threat. Back at the lake house, Grandpa smiled as I played the audio. Douglas, on tape, discussing how to bypass BlakeLogic's patent protections, how to forge executive signatures, how to make my embarrassment of a stepson disappear. Grandpa's voice didn't tremble. He just said, "Get the SEC on the phone. It's time." You'd think that being gifted a $120 million company would feel like freedom. But when your own mother and her husband throw you out like a mistake, it feels like exile. I was Eli Blake, granddaughter of Harold Blake, the man who built BlakeLogic from a garage into a global tech empire. But after my 22nd birthday, I wasn't just his heir. I became a threat. My mother always wanted to be respected in business, but she never built anything herself. She married into wealth, then remarried into power. Douglas Shaw, her new husband, was handsome, smooth-talking, and, as I just found out, a snake in an Armani suit. He didn't want me to succeed him. He wanted me erased. After I was kicked out of the house and cut off from the company I legally owned, Grandpa took me to our family's lake house, the one no one ever visited anymore. There, in a dusty study surrounded by legal pads and encryption hardware, I learned about Plan B. "You need to disappear," Grandpa said, sliding a folder across the table. "At least for now." Inside, a new name. Ethan Bryce, cybersecurity consultant. Certifications, resume, online profiles, even staged photos with startup CEOs. "Isn't Ethan a guy's name?" I asked, raising a brow. "You'll wear a beanie and glasses," Grandpa smirked. "Tech bros never ask questions if you're quiet and useful." I had to laugh. But it was a bitter laugh. I was going undercover in my own company. And so, Ethan Bryce was born. I cut my hair into a sleek bob. No makeup. Baggy hoodie. I even adopted a slight Midwestern accent for phone calls. 2 days later, I walked into BlakeLogic under a fake name, hired as a cybersecurity analyst on a short-term efficiency contract. And no one noticed. Not even my stepfather, the man who threw me out of my own future. Douglas was parading around the executive floor like a lion in a glass cage. The staff called him Mr. Shaw now. Never Douglas. He hosted daily briefings filled with buzzwords and barely disguised self-praise. "We're restructuring," he'd say. "Streamlining. Positioning for an international acquisition." He meant selling BlakeLogic to a foreign buyer. And my mother? She played the perfect partner, smiling through every photo op, complimenting his vision, whispering in corners. I used to think she was just under his influence. Now, I knew better. She was in on it. Grandpa's team had installed a keystroke logger on Douglas's work devices months ago. That's how we caught the trail. Shell corporations in Belize. Consulting fees paid to offshore accounts. And signed NDAs. And worst of all, drafted contracts with Lynx Tech, a foreign tech firm known for buying up American software companies, stripping their patents, and dumping the staff. If Douglas succeeded, BlakeLogic wouldn't just be stolen, it would be dismantled. The plan had 4 parts. Record everything. Trigger a secret emergency board meeting. Freeze the sale. expose Douglas in front of the world. But that meant I had to get close. Really close. I embedded myself on the cybersecurity floor, pretending to be an analyst tasked with improving internal protocols. No one paid me any mind, except one man. Tyson. Lead developer. Mid-30s. Bearded. Smelled like burnt coffee and ambition. He was the only one who looked at me like something was off. "You from the Montana project?" he asked one afternoon, squinting. "Yup," I said, deepening the drawl slightly. "Big cloud migration mess. Just here for cleanup." He nodded, but his eyes lingered. I knew he was smart. Too smart. So I pivoted. Over the next 2 weeks, I built trust. I fixed code no one else could. I stopped 2 phishing attacks. I even uncovered a data leak and got a slow clap in a Thursday stand-up. Tyson started calling me Bryce. Douglas stopped seeing me completely. Perfect. Meanwhile, Grandpa's forensic accountant discovered something else. Douglas was pushing for me to be declared legally unfit to hold a board seat. He was compiling a psychological profile, faking documents, suggesting I'd had breakdowns in college. There was even a forged letter from a therapist claiming I suffered from paranoid delusions. He was literally building a case to have me removed from my own inheritance. That's when I snapped. I wasn't going to wait for Plan B. I was starting Plan C, chaos. The next morning, I posed as a security tester and requested temporary access to Douglas's executive calendar. The admin on duty, a sweet intern named Megan, gave it to me without a second thought. And that's when I saw it. Private meeting, Lynx Tech CEO, Thursday, 9 a.m. Location, Executive Conference Room C. This wasn't theoretical anymore. It was happening. In 48 hours. I alerted Grandpa. He didn't blink. "We're ready. But we need him to confess. Can you provoke him?" I thought for a moment. Then I said, "Let me write the email." Using Douglas's personal account, "Thank you, keystroke logger." I drafted a fake message and scheduled it to send to Lynxtech's legal department, full of incriminating language. "We'll push the vote through no matter what. Eli Blake won't be a problem. By Friday, she'll be history." It was bait, and the hook was set. On Thursday morning, I wore my favorite blazer, the one my real self wore during high school debate finals. No hoodies, no glasses. I walked into conference room C at exactly 8:59 a.m. Douglas stared at me like he'd seen a ghost. "You're not allowed in here." I tossed a stack of papers on the table. Audio transcripts, IP logs, calendar access reports, and the kicker, his forged psychological profile with my name on it. Then the door opened again. 3 people walked in. Not Lynx Tech. SEC agents. Douglas panicked. My mother, who had slipped in behind him, turned ghost white. "I didn't know," she whispered, stepping back. "Really?" I asked. "Because your name is on every transfer document." He tried to run. Yes, run. Security stopped him in the hallway. My mother burst into tears on the marble floor as agents handcuffed her husband. She reached for me. I stepped back. "You told me to pack my bags and leave." So I did. And I came back with an army. The arrest made headlines within the hour. CEO fraud scandal at BlakeLogic. Inside job revealed by tech heiress. The board reconvened that night. And guess who they voted in as interim CEO? Me. But it wasn't over. Not yet. Because the deeper we dug, the more secrets came spilling out. And just when I thought Douglas had been fully exposed, we found something worse. After Douglas was dragged out of BlakeLogic in handcuffs, you'd think I'd feel victorious. I didn't. I felt hollow. It wasn't just that my mother chose her husband over her daughter. It wasn't just the fake documents or the scheme to sell my inheritance. It was the part that still hadn't made the news. The part only Grandpa and I knew. There was still a bomb ticking. You see, even though I was now interim CEO, I didn't yet have permanent control. Grandpa had gifted me 51% of the company's shares, but under a specific clause. One he'd added years ago to protect the company from bloodsuckers. The clause said this: full control of BlakeLogic Holdings shall remain conditional until the primary beneficiary proves their capacity to lead, not just legally, but ethically, through independent and verifiable action. Translation? Grandpa didn't just want me to be CEO. He wanted to test my soul. So far, I had done well. I'd gone undercover, exposed a scam, took back the boardroom. But now I had to face the final test. Something Grandpa had never warned me about. The Blake Logic Trust included a buried clause, one only triggered if major internal fraud occurred. It stated that in the event of a hostile takeover attempt, another party could be granted temporary oversight power until the company was deemed secure. And that party was named in black ink. Jenna Blake, my mother. When I saw the document, I felt like the ground fell out from under me. How is that possible? I asked the lawyer, practically yelling. She's a blood relative, he said. Harold appointed her over a decade ago, when she was still on the family board. But she's the one who just tried to sell the company. Yes, he said calmly, but the clause predates that. Legally, she has a right to invoke it. I called Grandpa. He didn't answer, which was unusual. The next day, I found out why. He was in the hospital, collapsed from stress. Heart issues. 72 hours under observation. My only true ally's gone silent. And while he recovered, my mother stepped into the power vacuum like a snake slipping through an open door. She filed an emergency injunction to freeze the board's decision and regain temporary oversight as acting trustee. I barely had time to breathe before I got the court notice. Jenna Blake versus Eli Blake. Hearing date, 9 days. She was suing me. She can't win, Marcus, my lawyer, said over coffee. But I wasn't so sure. Because she wasn't acting alone. She had a new partner. Enter Philip Lane, corporate lawyer, former hedge fund guy, smirked like a villain in a legal drama. He was the one backing her new strategy, claiming that Grandpa's gift was given under undue influence and that I had manipulated a sick elderly man into giving me power. It was disgusting. And smart. Because while we were cleaning up Douglas's mess, they were building a brand new lie. And the media? They loved it. Eris accused of forcing Grandfather's hand. Too young, too greedy? Did Eli Blake orchestrate her stepfather's fall? Public perception was shifting fast. I met with Tyson again. He had been promoted since the Douglas takedown. Quiet, trustworthy, sharp. I don't want to push, he said, but do you want me to run a trace? A trace? He nodded. I can check if Philip Lane has any direct connection to Lynx Tech. Maybe there's still a shadow trail we can follow. Do it, I said. Burn the shadows. Meanwhile, I visited Grandpa. He looked weak, wires and monitors everywhere, but his eyes still had fire. I'm sorry, I whispered, holding his hand. I didn't see her coming. You did everything right, he said, voice thin. Now finish it. How? Tell the truth. Even when it hurts. And that's when I remembered something. The journals. Grandpa kept physical journals. Business notes. Personal thoughts. And he told me once, years ago, I write everything down. Because memories fade. But the truth survives ink. I went to the lake house and tore the study apart. And there it was. Journal number 28. Inside, page after page detailing Douglas's manipulation. But more importantly, a letter Grandpa had written to a judge. Signed. Dated. Notarized. It read, if this ever ends up in court and Jenna Blake claims rightful ownership, please know she has been estranged from my business values for over a decade. I appointed her originally out of legacy loyalty. But my granddaughter, Eli Blake, has proven herself through action, intelligence, and moral strength. She is the rightful heir. I revoke all trust in Jenna Blake, effective immediately. Harold Blake. I cried. Not because it fixed everything, but because for the first time, I had proof that I wasn't crazy, that someone still believed in me. Tyson messaged me later that night. Got something. Philip Lane and Douglas Shaw were law school roommates. Joint business ventures in 2016 and 2019. Shell companies in the Caymans. Bingo. The court would hear all of it. The next week, the courtroom was full. Mom and pearls, fake tears already loaded. Philip Lane smug as ever. Me in a black suit and zero patience. My lawyer presented everything: Douglas's scam, my mother's knowledge, the illegal trust maneuver. Then I pulled out the journal. This was written by Harold Blake. Notarized. His final words on who he trusted. The judge leaned forward. The tension in that room could have split mountains. Then came Tyson's report. Documented evidence tying Philip Lane to Douglas and Lynx Tech. It was over. The judge ruled in my favor. Jenna was barred from trust oversight permanently. Philip Lane was referred to the Bar Association. The courtroom emptied slowly, but I stayed behind. For once, I didn't want to run. I wanted to breathe. But right as I was about to leave, my phone buzzed. New message from unknown. Nice win, princess. But the game's not over. You still haven't figured out who gave your mother access to that clause in the first place. I froze. Because only 2 people had access to that clause.
Grandpa.
And someone else from inside the company. Nice win, princess. But the game's not over. You still haven't figured out who gave your mother access to that clause in the first place. The message hit harder than I wanted to admit. Because it was true. The clause in Grandpa's trust, buried, technical, and shielded, was only known by 2 people. One was Grandpa himself. The other was supposed to be on my side. That night, I locked myself in my condo, shut off all my notifications, and did something I hadn't done since I was 16. I went completely analog. I printed every digital document Grandpa had ever given me, mapped every connection, laid out sticky notes, timelines, passwords, and board logs across the floor like a conspiracy theorist on a mission. Then I circled the list of people with trust access. And there it was. 3 names. Harold Blake, the firm managing the Blake Family Trust. Board Secretary, Lydia Harper. Lydia. She was sharp, composed, always immaculately dressed, and had been at Blake Logic longer than I'd been alive. She ran the legal filings, coordinated board communication, and handled Grandpa's trust archives. She was also one of the few people my mother still called darling. The next day, I walked into the boardroom early, before anyone arrived, and I pulled the surveillance logs. I had installed security cams after my reinstatement, strictly for internal transparency, but also because my trust had been nuked. I watched recordings of Lydia's office. On March 17th, 3 days before my mother filed her emergency injunction, Lydia was visited after hours by a man wearing a dark coat and hat. He never looked at the camera. But the security logs showed he used Lydia's ID to enter, not his own. I took the footage to Grandpa, who was finally discharged from the hospital. He watched it in silence. Then, to my surprise, he said, "I knew it might be her."
I spun. What?
"She was loyal to your grandmother."
And to Jenna.
"She always resented that I gave you the company instead of keeping it in the bloodline." "She is bloodline. She's poison." Grandpa pulled out a drawer in his study and handed me a black envelope. I opened it. Inside was a flash drive. "Everything's encrypted," he said. "But once you access it, you'll see exactly what Lydia was promised to betray us." "What did she get in return?" He chuckled darkly. "A guaranteed seat on the Lynx Tech Advisory Board." I took the drive to Tyson. Within an hour, he cracked it. Inside were emails between Lydia, Douglas, and Philip Lane, dating back over a year. They laid out a plan to gradually push Grandpa into a quiet retirement, install Douglas as CEO, and later transition control of the tech division to Lynx Tech in exchange for overseas consulting royalties. In short, a full dismantling of our legacy. Lydia's name was on every single draft. The next board meeting, I didn't hold back. I played the emails on a shared screen. Lydia sat stone-faced as the boardroom went silent. I turned to her directly. "You were in the room when I got the company. You congratulated me. You called me your future. But the whole time, you were selling the future behind our backs." She sighed and stood up slowly. And then she said something that knocked the air out of me. "You're smart, Eli. But you don't know how this game works yet. The boardroom doesn't reward morals. It rewards control. And you don't have enough of it." She walked out before I could respond. resigned, but unapologetic. The board voted unanimously to expel her and press civil charges. But her words stayed with me. Was she right? Had I inherited too soon? Was I just reacting while everyone else was already 5 moves ahead? Later that week, Tyson pulled me aside with another twist. Someone just made a massive move on our IP database, he said. At 3 a.m. this morning. What kind of move? Not a leak. A lockout. Someone's trying to trigger a false firewall breach, so the system quarantines itself. Then they can quietly wipe the backups. Who has access? Just you, me, and one other person.
Who?
He hesitated.
Grandpa.
I called him immediately. No answer. I drove to the lake house. His car was gone. The house was empty. But on the table, another envelope. Inside. If you're reading this, it means I've made my final move.
Don't panic.
I'm fine, but I've gone underground for now. Trust no one, not even the board. Finish what we started. And when the time comes, meet me in Zurich. There was no signature, just a plane ticket. Open date. I sat down, stunned. Grandpa was alive, active, and hiding, which meant this wasn't the end. It was a transition. The next morning, Blake Logic released a public statement. Due to internal restructuring and emerging threats, CEO Eli Blake will be taking a temporary sabbatical to focus on cybersecurity expansion abroad. It wasn't true, but it bought me time. I packed my bags, boarded the flight, and whispered to myself as the engines roared. This isn't running away. It's advancing. Because this wasn't just about defending a company anymore. It was about dismantling an empire of lies that had lived in my family far too long. Zurich was cold, gray, and quiet. Perfect for secrets. The address Grandpa left in the envelope was tucked into the cobbled Old Town district. The kind of place tourists took pictures of without realizing the walls had watched centuries of betrayal. I climbed a narrow staircase, heart pounding, and knocked on the third-floor door labeled H. B. Strauss. It opened before I could knock a second time. Grandpa stood there in a charcoal turtleneck and wireframe glasses like he'd walked out of a European spy novel. "Welcome to my last checkmate," he said with a soft smile. The apartment was simple. Books, folders, a fire crackling in a corner. But in the center of the room was a large corkboard, filled edge to edge with names, company logos, and pins connected by red string. At the center, Blake Logic. Surrounding it, Lynx Tech, the Cayman accounts, Lydia Harper, Philip Lane, and a name I hadn't seen before, Oberlin AG. "What's that?" I asked, pointing. "Oberlin is the real buyer," Grandpa said. "Lynx Tech was just a decoy to distract you from the real danger." I frowned. "You mean we haven't stopped the sale?" He shook his head. "We stopped the front, but someone's still working the back door." I leaned closer. Under Oberlin AG, I saw a name written in bold black ink. Tyson K. Lane. I blinked. Tyson? My most trusted tech lead? The one who helped decode everything? I almost laughed. There has to be a mistake. "I thought so too," Grandpa said. Until I tracked the server-side injections. They used his company ID to authorize the firewall breach. And when I followed the trail further, Oberlin AG made a direct payment to someone with his digital signature 6 months ago. I sat down. Hard. I trusted him. "He trusts you too," Grandpa said carefully. "That's why he's dangerous. Because you don't suspect him." I stared at the name. It didn't make sense. Tyson helped me break into Douglas's calendar. He helped me secure the audit files. He encouraged me to run for interim CEO. Or so I thought. I asked Grandpa for time. And I called Tyson. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice casual. "I'm in Europe doing damage control. Need your help on a few back-end protocols." He agreed instantly. "Send the files." Instead, I sent a tracer packet. One of Grandpa's tech tricks. It looked like a corrupted log file. But when opened, it secretly mapped where the response was sent. 15 minutes later, the tracer pinged a match. An IP address registered to Oberlin AG, routed through a VPN but leaking a Swiss node. Tyson was working with them. My hands shook. I wanted to scream, but instead, I messaged Tyson again. Thanks. One more thing, can we hop on a call in 20? I want to pick your brain on the encryption stuff. He replied,
Sure.
I'm free in 10.
Perfect.
Grandpa wired up a secure video line. When Tyson appeared on screen, smiling in his usual flannel hoodie, I stared at him like I was looking at a ghost. Hey, boss, he said. You okay? You look different. I just found out you've been feeding my family's enemies corporate backdoor access for months. His smile vanished. Eli. Don't lie, I snapped. I have the server trails. I have the payout record. You betrayed us. He sighed. I didn't want to hurt you. Then why? Because you were never supposed to win. There it was. The truth. I was recruited before Douglas even took over, he continued. Lydia reached out. They said you were being groomed to inherit too fast, that the company would collapse under idealistic hands. You believed that? I believed you weren't ready, he said. And yeah, the money helped. But I never wanted it to go this far. Tell that to my grandfather's hospital bill, I said coldly. He flinched. Here's what's going to happen, I told him. You're going to send me access to the Oberlin contract draft. Then you're going to disappear. If I see your name anywhere near my system again, Interpol will. He hesitated, then nodded. 2 minutes later, the document hit my inbox. The contract was real. Dated, signed, prepared for submission next week. Oberlin AG had been planning to scoop up BlakeLogic's quantum patents through a blind trust acquisition once Douglas and Jenna's drama was done. It was the endgame, and Tyson was the final piece.
Now.
I had the blueprint to destroy it all. Grandpa called an emergency meeting with Swiss legal counsel. We filed 2 injunctions. One against Oberlin's acquisition structure. One against any movement of BlakeLogic patents without board review. Both were approved in 48 hours. The deal was dead. Back in the States, the board received an anonymous leak. Former insider exposes global conspiracy to acquire BlakeLogic through offshore fraud. The media exploded again. This time, I wasn't the target. I was the one holding the detonator. 3 days later, Tyson sent one final message. You were always better than them. I just didn't want to admit it. Goodbye, Eli. He deleted everything. Vanished from LinkedIn.
Gone.
I didn't mourn. Because I couldn't afford to anymore. Trust wasn't given. Not in my world. Not anymore. I stayed in Zurich for 1 more week. Finalized the firewall lockdown. Rebuilt the quantum archive security protocol. Met with 3 potential partners to expand BlakeLogic's European footprint, on my terms this time. And then I returned home. When I landed at JFK, a woman I didn't recognize was waiting for me in arrivals.
Tall.
Impeccable pantsuit. No smile. She handed me a sealed envelope and said, This is from someone you never knew existed, but who's been watching everything. I opened it, and inside was a photo. A black and white snapshot of Grandpa shaking hands with a man I'd never seen before. On the back, not all enemies come from outside. Some were there before you were even born. We need to talk. No name, no number, just another threat. The photo in my hand felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Grandpa was younger in it, maybe mid-40s. Clean cut, broad-shouldered, laughing in a way I'd never seen. He was shaking hands with a man who looked just as sharp, but not like a friend, more like a rival. The kind of man you shake hands with only when cameras are watching. On the back of the photo were just 11 words. Not all enemies come from outside. Some were there before you were born. And suddenly, I had more questions than answers. Grandpa didn't mention the photo when I visited him after returning from Zurich. But when I brought it up, he didn't even flinch. He just said, So you found him. We were sitting on his back porch, sipping tea. No lawyers. No advisors. Just truth. I stared at him. Found who? He set down his mug. His name is Malcolm Ford. And once upon a time, he was supposed to be your father. My jaw dropped. What? He nodded. He was your mother's fiancé. They were engaged before she met your biological father. This felt like gossip. A side plot. But Grandpa leaned in. Malcolm wasn't just some old flame. He was my original business partner. Blake Logic was nearly called Ford and Blake Innovations, until I found out he'd been leaking our early designs to an overseas competitor. I sat there, stunned. He tried to steal the company? He did steal part of it, Grandpa said, then disappeared. But now I suspect he never really left. I pulled out the photo. Why send this now? Because if he's back, it means we're not done yet. Not by a long shot. That night, I dug deep. I hired a private intel firm based in DC, the kind that didn't show up on Google. Within 36 hours, I had a file on Malcolm Ford. He was living in the Cayman Islands, registered under a fake name, Michael Farron. But here's where it got worse. He sat on the board of Oberlin AG, the same company that tried to buy Blake Logic through my stepfather schemes. Grandpa hadn't just been betrayed by Douglas, Jenna, Lydia, and Tyson. He'd been stalked by a ghost for 30 years.
And now?
I was the final target. I met with Marcus, my lawyer, and laid it all out. If this guy tries to use any past claim to the company, we need to shut it down. But Marcus looked grim. There's one problem. What? He already filed something. 25 years ago. Turns out, Malcolm had filed a quiet lawsuit in the late 90s, claiming partial intellectual property rights to Blake Logic's earliest patents. The court rejected it. But the ruling came with a dangerous note. If any new evidence emerges, this claim may be reconsidered. Grandpa sighed when I told him. I buried that history for a reason. Yeah? Well, now it's trying to dig us up. The only way to neutralize Malcolm for good was to prove he hadn't just stolen ideas, but committed full-scale espionage. The kind that nullifies corporate claims forever. And Grandpa had just the lead. He handed me an old briefcase from his study. Inside, blueprints, email transcripts, handwritten letters, all proving Malcolm had sent files to a Russian affiliate company in 1994. He kept it all, but he never submitted it to the court. Why not? I asked. Because I was trying to protect your mother, he said quietly. She loved him once. I thought letting it fade would preserve her sanity. But her sanity came at the cost of my security. Now we had to move.
Fast.
We submitted the documents to the U.S. Patent Review Board and the International Business Tribunal. Marcus prepared a restraining order against any claims from Oberlin AG or Malcolm Ford/Michael Farron. We also filed for a lifetime injunction barring any relitigation of Blake Logic's ownership under fraud protection clauses. And then something strange happened. The press got wind of Malcolm Ford. Not from us. From him. He gave an interview to a shady European media outlet. He claimed to be the true founder of Blake Logic, robbed of his legacy by a greedy old man, and now being shut out by the man's naive granddaughter. He painted me as a spoiled heiress. Even said I was too emotional to run a company. I was furious. Until I realized he just made a mistake. Because in that interview, Malcolm mentioned specific details from a prototype that was never released to the public. Details only someone who stole the original files could possibly know. That clip became our smoking gun. We submitted it alongside the old evidence. And finally, the hammer came down. The court issued a permanent corporate disassociation order. Malcolm Ford was now legally banned from filing any business claims against Blake Logic in the US and European Union. He vanished from the media. But I knew better than to think it was over. Grandpa met me on the rooftop of our New York office to celebrate. Sunset glinted off the skyline. He looked older now, but lighter. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner, he said. You were protecting me, I replied. That's what Blake leaders do. He smiled. I hope you forgive me one day. I already did. But even as we hugged, I couldn't shake one final thought. If Malcolm had come this far, how many more ghosts were out there? And what else did Grandpa bury to protect me? You'd think that after everything, after surviving corporate espionage, after dismantling a global scheme, after watching my own mother turn her back on me, that I'd finally feel safe. But the higher you climb, the lonelier the air, and the more enemies you leave in the shadows, watching. It had been 2 months since Malcolm Ford's final loss in court. 2 months since Grandpa's name was cleared, and mine finally respected. Blake logic was back in full swing, but now, under me, we were rebuilding the team, redesigning product lines, expanding into AI infrastructure. But deep down, I knew something was coming. Because Grandpa had been acting different. Not tired, resolved. Like someone who is tying knots before setting sail. It happened on a Thursday. He called me into his study, same as always. Same fire crackling in the hearth. Same mug of chamomile on the table. But this time, there was a thick envelope between us. And when I sat down, he didn't speak. He just slid it over. "What's this?" I asked, already dreading the answer. He looked at me, calm, soft, proud. "This is my goodbye." Inside was a final contract. A legacy clause. Written 10 years ago. Never filed.
Until now.
According to it, the company had a hidden override. If Harold Blake passed away or entered cognitive decline, his successor would receive full legal control of all assets, including the trust, real estate, and silent patents, but only if they completed the ethos audit. It sounded like science fiction, but what it meant was everything. The ethos audit wasn't financial. It was moral. A measured breakdown of every decision I had made since my 22nd birthday. How I handled betrayal. Whether I prioritized ethics over profit. Whether I had become a guardian of the company, or just another predator. Turns out, Grandpa had quietly been documenting it all. With timestamps, board logs, private reviews from employees, even notes on how I treated the interns. He had watched me not just survive Blake logic, but become worthy of it. And now it was mine. Not as a gift, but because I earned it. I cried when I signed the final document, not because I was overwhelmed, but because for the first time, I truly understood how much he had protected me by making me fight for it. He smiled, frail now, but sharp as ever. "I can go now," he whispered. "My work is finished." That night, we had dinner together. Just the two of us. Lasagna. His favorite bourbon. No cameras. No legacy talk. Just family. He died 3 days later. In his sleep. Peacefully. The world reacted as expected. Tech titan Harold Blake dies at 78. Visionary founder leaves behind empire and heiress. Eli Blake inherits full control of $120 million giant. But what the headlines didn't say was that he didn't just leave behind a company. He left behind a blueprint. I didn't mourn in public. I didn't cry at the shareholder memorial. I wore all black, stood tall, and announced. From this day forward, Blake Logic will not just be a leader in innovation. It will be a protector of ethical tech, economic justice, and real transparency. Because legacy isn't what you build. It's how you leave the world better than you found it. The room erupted, not with applause, but with silence. The kind of silence that comes from respect. In the weeks that followed, I launched 3 new initiatives. BGuard, a cybersecurity alliance that offered free protection to small startups from predatory corporate attacks. The Herald Fund, a $10 million grant reserved for women in tech leadership under 25. Ghostlight, a digital vault where whistleblowers could safely upload corruption evidence and trigger automatic investigations. But one final twist remained. The reading of Grandpa's personal will. Everyone assumed I'd get everything. But that's not how he worked. His attorney passed out envelopes, one per name. My mother's was short. "You chose silence. That will be your inheritance." Douglas's contained nothing but an invoice. $12.3 million in damages. Due upon release. Tyson received a photograph of us from the company retreat in 2019. On the back. "You were almost family, but you chose fear." Then came mine. Inside was a note. To Eli, "You were never the quiet one. You were the watcher, the learner. And when the storm came, you weren't loud, you were lightning. You are not my legacy. You are the upgrade. Now go build something that even I couldn't imagine." That day, I sat at the corner office desk. My desk now. And I smiled. Not because I won, but because I endured. This isn't a revenge story anymore. It's a rebirth. From betrayed to built. From exile to empire. And if you're still watching, if you've ever had something stolen from you, family,
Career.
legacy, identity, know this. They may come for your name, but they can't touch your fire.